Right, Beth, Anna, Louise. Local board.
I think Louise and Ian.
Oh, and Ian as well.
Louise and
Yep. Louise, please introduce your team to everyone. So
Yes,
those
thank
who
you.
don't know.
Thank you, Chair. We have Anna Bray on my left here, who's Manager Policy and Planning. Beth Colbert, also from our team, myself, Louise Mason, and Ian Maxwell. Chair and councillors, our report this morning is an overview of the local board feedback and advocacy on the annual budget. As you know, and as outlined in the report, local boards have a statutory role to provide input on regional plans, and there's three ways in which they can do that. Firstly, through local board agreements. Secondly, by providing feedback on regional topics. And thirdly, advocating on issues and projects that are important to their local community. This feedback that we have in this report both gives the detail from each of the local boards, but also focuses on some of the common themes. As you'll see, there's a very wide range of advice that has come from the 21 boards, and in the time and given the scale of that feedback, it hasn't been possible to do an in-depth analysis or investigation of all of these issues, but today Ian will give a bit of a highlight around some of the issues where we have been able to do some assessment, and particularly where these can feed into either existing or future work programs. Just briefly before Ian does that, just to highlight the key themes that local boards resolved on regional issues in the annual budget. Basically, support for all proposed changes to rating and fee charges, and secondly, support for the proposed amendment regarding property transfers. In terms of advocacy issues and key advocacy projects, briefly to summarise these, there was a common theme around equitable funding for and adequate provision of community facilities, particularly to facilitate growth, improving water quality across the region, waste management, and also highlighting the development of sub-regional resource recovery centres in parts of the region in the South Central and Waiheke Island. There were a number of issues around addressing environmental concerns, and lastly, delivery of key advocacy projects, and the workshop that was held also highlighted these issues as well. So just returning to where these advocacy issues will go, I'll now hand over to Ian, who will talk about some of the examples of where we've been able to identify where some of these issues can be picked up through regional work programs or for future work. Thanks, Ian.
Okay, look, thanks very much, Louise. Look, a lot of these projects that are proposed or initiatives proposed by the local boards, there's a great diversity of them, and so they feed into the organisation and to a number of our programs and projects in different ways. So I'll just run through examples of the way things can be picked up. So some can be picked up in the governance framework review. So for example, Hibiscus and Bays highlighted concerns around the Estuary Arts Centre, and so the provision of arts and the way that's provided for across our centre is part of the governance framework review, which is coming back to you early next year. There's also a number of projects that were proposed. Auraki proposed Okahu Bay ecological restoration, and Tahuna Taria, and Papakura around Kirk's Bush. These projects can be linked into the work program associated with the environmental separate rate. It'll mean some changes in terms of priorities, but nevertheless we have a process to pick those up. We've also got other initiatives that came through that can be picked up in the waste strategy, particularly from Manurewa. We've got a number of initiatives that are picked up. So, for example, Mangere Otahu around the local alcohol policy. That's tied up in the courts at the moment, but we can pick up the initiatives there in terms of their community. We also have our Auckland Paths program, so a number of initiatives. Mangere Otahu, for example, highlighted the Portage Road route or the Portage Path that can be picked up as part of that Auckland Paths network. So there will need to be some thinking about how we do that in terms of prioritisation. Some of these projects are new, but nevertheless we have a process to pick them up. And we've also obviously got some examples that have been picked up in the mayoral proposal, such as the Hibiscus Coast Youth Centre. So our proposal is to come back in August with where all of these projects can be picked up, where we can pick them up in existing programs. We'll highlight that. I suspect there's bound to be a number that can only be picked up perhaps as we head into the next long-term plan and decisions are made around resourcing. But that's given the diversity and the nature of those initiatives proposed by our local boards, that's how we're proposing to pick them up.
Thanks very much, Ian, and we're happy to answer any questions on the.
Councillor Simpson.
So thank you, and thank you for that that response, because obviously that's a big one. A lot of these resolutions say request that the governing body direct staff to or whatever, all right? So I'm very interested in finding out which you are going to do anyway and which potentially you have a problem with, therefore politically what I can do to get some sort of agreement between the two. So when do you think that document can come back to us for those wards who have asked us as their co-governor to deliver for them? I want to find that sweet middle ground when you've done your work before you approve it. Can it quietly come to us for a look at?
Yes, I'm sure it can come to you to have a look at.
Okay, let me put this another way. Can you make sure it does?
I can make sure it does. And our aim is to have this work available. We were aiming to get back to the local boards in August, so we could do that before then.
So, sorry, just supplementary if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman. So we're in May, so you'll think between May and June you'll figure out what can work for them and whatever, and then you'll come to us potentially June, July, and then go back to a response. So local boards will know that all their issues will be responded to in August.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker.
There were some local boards that were advocating for heavy rail to the airport. There were a number of them that I heard. I haven't seen a business case yet. I don't know whether a business case exists for light rail to the airport as compared to heavy rail to the airport. So where is that process at?
That process will need to be responded to by Auckland Transport and the New Zealand Transport Agency, but that's where that information and the initiatives and concerns and views of local boards would need to be plugged into, and obviously a decision made by those agencies responsible for that type of investment.
Okay, well, we're in a quiet mood today. Councillor Cooper. Well, I think we can take a blend at the moment.
Okay, so a question, but I just noticed the feedback on the Waitaki Rural Sewerage targeted rate, and it's good to see that picked up later on, because it's really clear from the feedback that Waitaki Ranges Local Board residents who have the old style septic tanks don't want to have that service taken away. So I think that's been a really good part of the process. They've been really well heard, and then that has been altered in our final proposal. So that shows that our system in terms of hearing people is working. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to move this. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cooper? Right, I'm going to put, Councillor Lee.
Just one question that relates to the Waiheke Local Board's advocacy initiatives. Is that just the right time to it's not in the paper, but I know that from discussions I've had with the chair yesterday, that the local board is particularly concerned that Waiheke also be included in any weekend fare discount scheme that's proposed in the budget, and also they would like some clarity, as indeed I would, around the integration of ferry fares. I know that technically Waiheke is integrated because of the hop card, but could you help us with that, Mr Maxwell?
Afraid I cannot help with that.
Well, we had feedback yesterday, but we'll ask Mark, I think Mark to come up, Mark Lambert. Colin, Mark.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. So you're right, Councillor. The prime issue is integration because the Waiheke Ferry is an exempt service. So legally it's outside of the contracted public transport system. Therefore, we would need to negotiate with Fullers for any revenue compensation in effect to put in free weekend or even integrated fares into Waiheke. In the time frame where we've looked at different fare scenarios, we haven't had opportunity to do that, but we've tried to stay within the legal framework of the contracted system at this point.
I would point out that there is a difference between the ferry service and the bus service. The bus service being contracted, and I therefore assume that it will be treated just the same as any bus service in the city. Would that be right?
That is basically correct. So from October this year is when Waiheke buses move into the contracted system. It's the final part of the migration from the old deregulated system to the new contracted system. So free child fares on Waiheke buses will be in place at the same time as the rest of the network.
Thank you very much. So the only sticking point would be, as always has been, the ferry service, private ferry service.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So, councillors, you notice you have a separate paper because the Waiheke advocacy was late, so you have a separate paper. Right, well, we have no further questions. I'm going to put that. All those in favour for A, consider feedback and advocacy from local boards. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Right, thank you. Right, we are racing on. Thank you, Louise and team. And right, well, we move on to the main act of the day, and I'm going to ask the Mayor to